Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Creeps and Creeps. My name is Cece Delaney, and look, it's my face. A lot of people gave the feedback that not seeing my face and having the blur was extremely distracting. It gave headaches. One person said that they had to keep pausing the video and coming back because the blur was just excessive. So, I mean, snaps to you for coming back. I do appreciate you. But I decided to listen to the feedback and show my stinky little face, and so here it is. Hello, hi. Skiing right past that, today we are going to be talking about Caylee Marie Anthony. This particular episode is going to be focusing heavily on the evidence that led to millions of people thinking that she was guilty, including myself. And then next episode, we're going to be diving deep into all of the evidence that Caylee stans are just salivating over that led a bunch of other people to think that she was actually innocent. Also, I would like to point out that the consensus for that structure came because I posted a poll in my community tab. So if you guys want to vote on episodes, put in input, whatever, just chit chat outside of the sometimes toxic comment section, just go to the community tab. I'll be posting fairly regularly in there, just updates on new episodes, possible episode choices, kind of everything I already said. Also, subscribe, hit bell, especially because a gajillion other content creators, I post on Mondays as well. So if you're super interested in seeing my shit, hit the bell icon. I'll see you every Monday. Anywho, let's get into it. I said let's get into it, but also I do need to say that this episode contains a good amount of sensitive topics. I mean, murder in and of itself, not great, but this also contains themes of SA, rain and petals eavesdrop.
RAPE, rain and petals eavesdrop. I used the wrong word.
Rain and petals eavesdrop.
Child. There's just a lot happening. Anywho, Caylee Anthony was born March 19th, 1986 in Warren, Ohio, to Cindy Anthony and George Anthony. Cindy was a home health nurse. George, he was a former Trumbull County Sheriff's deputy. She also had a brother named Lee, who's 4 years older than her. It's not super relevant until later in the story, as far as Caylee's formative years, allegedly. We'll get into that later in an hour. Buckle in. So in 1989, George runs for the Trumbull County clerk. Shouldn't be a tongue twister, but I'm sick and we're going with that as my excuse. I did try to find people being
fuck the Anthony family back in 1989.
But no, by literally all accounts that I could find, everyone really seemed to like them. The neighbors didn't really have any complaints. They noticed that the family was just this all-American mama and papa, son and daughter, Berenstain Bears-esque vibe, just kind of wholesome. I mean, the dad was a deputy, the mom was a nurse. All they're missing is the white picket fence and the golden retriever, and they're straight up WandaVisioning this bitch. All sorts of all-American family. Caylee herself was reported to be super energetic and super kind and unflinchingly positive. And everyone was like, wow, how cute. Later on, that turned out to be a fucking problem. But at the time, wow, how cute. Caylee kind of maintained that reputation even through high school, even when she was kind of found out to be a big fat liar. So as Caylee's senior year is wrapping up, she's getting her family all pumped about her graduation. Her parents are calling in grandma. They're calling in grandpa. They're getting the whole gang there. I mean, I'm sure there were other people outside of that. I couldn't find them. So the problem is no, she wasn't. Caylee refused to give her parents information or would deflect when they're like, hey sissy, when is your graduation? How many tickets do we need to buy? Where is it going to be held? Just the general information gathering in cases oh my god, is that Ben Affleck? Scoot on by. They don't need to know. But yes, they do. And so they call up the school and they're like, hi, when is our daughter supposed to be graduating? She literally won't tell us anything. And they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Caylee is not graduating. In fact, she has been truant and is failing her classes because she doesn't have enough credits because she was truant. And they're like, wait, what the fuck? But interestingly, I found that they still threw her graduation party and were like, oh my god, go Casey. No one look into it though. And like, she was still showered in praise and accolades, even though she like did not walk or graduate. The parents just kept up the front for her, allegedly. So that kind of comes up later. We're going to be setting the stage for a minute here because, in my humble opinion, and this is my channel, it all matters, and that's that on that. I thought I would have more points. I don't. It just matters to me. Anywho, Caylee ended up dropping out of high school. She said, I mean, she didn't really drop out. She just simply did not graduate, but we'll go with dropped out. And then she got a job at Universal Studios. Very important. Not for Universal, at, physically in. Whoa, do you hear my wrist? Jesus. Anyway, so she was in Universal Studios working for the Incredible Hulk ride, distributing pictures of the people going through some of the most terrifying moments of their lives on this ride. She was like, here you go, here's your ugly, stupid picture, love you, please leave me a tip. But like, according to Mama Anthony, she was absolutely killing the game there. And she even allegedly got Employee of the Month while working at this fucking kiosk. Now, while she was working there, fate smiled upon Miss Caylee because she ended up meeting her future fiance, a man named Jesse Grunt. He was working as a loss prevention officer and said that when he saw Caylee, it was love at first sight. He was smitten over the moon for this individual. At this stage in Jesse's life, he had just gotten out of college and he was like getting into the real world, getting his little tootsies under him, and he just so happened to meet Caylee and was maybe a little more malleable than someone who had a little more life experience, and so they immediately got into it and fell hard for each other. But like a few months into this relationship, Jesse was like, you're a quirky girl, but not really in a fun way, more like I am a little concerned if you start digging a hole in your backyard that's about my size kind of way. I guess Caylee was super duper clingy toward Jesse, and Jesse, sweet baby, was like, maybe she just really likes me. This isn't concerning. This is just love, babe. What's that quote from BoJack Horseman?
When you look at someone through rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags.
But after a minute, in about February or March of 2005, Jesse was like, oh, okay, the red flags are actually really clear at this point. Goodbye for now. TTFN. It was very Tigger of him. But you know, while they were dating, Jesse did introduce Caylee to his family, and his dad immediately was like, you sure she's like good? She's all there. The lights are on and someone's home? Because I don't agree. In fact, Jesse's dad in an interview said when he first met Caylee, she appeared to be pregnant. Hold on to that nugget. But for whatever reason, Caylee, who was 19 at this time, it's not like she was a child still living at home. I mean, she was still living at home, but she was of legal consenting age. She was actually pregnant, but she was like, no, I'm not. What the fuck are you talking about? And gaslit her friends and family into thinking that she wasn't pregnant. She was just maybe a little thick for the winter. One of the major issues I noticed with this entire case as I was diving deep into everything is there are so many conflicting stories. It's insane, and it doesn't help that the Anthony family in and of themselves love to spin a yarn. So we're gonna break this section down a little bit deeper into who's the daddy, who knew about this pregnancy, because apparently that's going to be a problem. And did Caylee actually lie about her pregnancy, or was that maybe forced upon her by an outside source? I also know that this sounds like a bunch of unnecessary information, but I just want to provide the information that I was able to research, give you all that I could find. You can form your own conclusions. Obviously, I have my own opinions about everything, but I just think it's kind of important to know the whole story. Also, I got dragged for fucking filth in the Chris Watts video, so I'm trying to avoid that again. I did appreciate all the feedback though. I know it sounds like I'm bitching about it. I can't grow if I don't know type vibe, so like, it's okay that there was feedback. I'm just a little self-conscious about it at this point. So with that being said, we're going to start with the baby daddy theories. Theory number 1, Jesse Grunt. Makes sense. They were dating at the time. Not that you have to be dating to conceive someone's baby, but that's what Caylee was trying to say once she eventually admitted to the fact that she was indeed knocked up. I'm going to be referencing that Caylee Anthony Where the Truth Lies documentary quite a bit in this, so just bear with me. But one of the things that Caylee herself said was that she let Jesse believe that she was pregnant throughout the entire pregnancy and didn't actually come out until there was a DNA test that proved that he was not the father.
You are not the father.
Casey also says that she knew that Caylee was the product of a Rain and Petals eavesdrop, which is another theory that we're going to touch on in a few bullet points. But until then, let's go into Eric Baker, because sorry, Jesse, but you are not the father. Apparently, this one was a hot topic for Mama Eric, because the first time that she had heard of any sort of potential minglings with Casey and Eric was during the documentary that I just talked about. She was like, okay, well, ma'am, he was a teen, so unless you're admitting to some other charges, tap the brakes, it was not my dear baby boy. Casey was trying to say that he was just a one-night stand, a high school friend, yada yada yada, but yeah, his mom was like, absolutely not, what the fuck are you talking about? But in typical mommy dearest fashion, Cindy was all about that lie. She's like, that was what happened. Want to know how I know? Because Casey said that she had sex with some guy in either Kentucky or North Carolina. Okay. Facts are checking out. Although the fact that Cindy wasn't even clear on the states personally speaks volumes to me, but draw your own conclusions, because we're also going to talk about the fact that Cindy didn't know Casey was pregnant, so who the fuck knows where the truth lies indeed. Unfortunately, Mr. Baker died in a car accident in 2007, so the truth will never really necessarily be confirmed, but Casey, during a later interrogation, for some reason brought up the fact that she had his death certificate, that she had his obituary, as if that was supposed to corroborate her story that Eric was the baby daddy. Like, it was just so unnecessary, but that's kind of the length that Casey historically goes to in order to try and prove her own stories. In another instance of a potential baby daddy who cannot... Can't get a goddamn sentence out in this piece. Jesus Ortiz is another potential baby daddy for Caylee Anthony. She says that she casually dated him, but unfortunately he's another instance of a man who passed away in 2007 because of a car accident. Again, his family was like, bitch, what the fuck? We don't know you, so why are you saying this? And they actually did get fully involved in this, and we're like, we literally have never met her. We don't think that Jesus ever met her. Keep his name out of your mouth, please, and thank you. Another theory that we have is Josh the coworker. Allegedly, he worked with her at Universal Studios. Casey had confided in a friend at the time that she was pregnant with his baby, and the friend was like, oh shit, wow, sounds legit. Turns out it wasn't, and also Josh cannot defend himself because, again, car accident. I am a little curious to see if any sort of DNA test would indicate some sort of family connection to any of these men, but I don't think any of the family actually ever gave their DNA. I couldn't find anything about Josh, Jesus, or Eric's family providing DNA in order to get a firm no. So as far as I could find, it's all kind of hearsay, but if you know differently, let me know in the comments. Now we're on to Michael Dugan. He was weird because he wasn't even mentioned by Casey. It was his mom, Donna. She was like hell-bent and convinced that Caylee was actually her granddaughter, but Michael is again passed away in a car accident. I'm starting to think that Casey had a real affinity for busting brake lines, but that would actually have to assume that she knew these men, and allegedly she didn't. But I don't know, man. I'm on my bullshit today, and I have some theories. Donna actually was interviewed at one point and said, quote, "We were talking about the upcoming birth of my other son's baby boy. I said I had really hoped for a baby girl grandchild, and that's when Michael told me that he already had one. In my opinion, this one's super unlikely, but it was specifically mentioned throughout my research, and so now I'm going to specifically mention it to you." Okay, so this is where things get a little sticky, like I was talking about earlier with the whole, like,
Rain and Petals eavesdrop.
incest. Basically topics that are already outside of the realm of what is an already fucked up topic, but basically this section's going to go into Lee Anthony and George Anthony as the potential fathers, so just hold on. Casey basically alleged in court in front of God and everyone that Lee and her father had basically like kind of taken turns doing dirty things to her, including but not limited to actual penetrative situations. So she's like, well, they could be the fathers. DNA test proved that no, that's not the case, but she bit down on that shit like a pit bull. That eventually became Casey's defense was, well, I'm a broken baby, so don't put me in prison, please and thank you. During 2 instances, Casey alleged that there was an R word that had happened that caused the birth of Caylee. So during her documentary Where the Truth Lies, she said that she'd had a few beers, felt kind of woozy, and then woke up with basically her pants around her ankles and feeling as though she had been assaulted. There was another instance that she recounted a very similar story during one of her interrogations. So like this part of me kind of thinks that this could actually be the truth, because I found with Casey, typically she'll tell one story and then it'll kind of vary a pretty noticeable amount to make it be like, okay, bitch, what? But this one, in my opinion's like, well, she hasn't really swayed from this story, so maybe. Like most victims of R, she felt icky about herself and decided to keep it to herself, never reported it, because a lot of fucked up people were like, no face, no case. Sorry, it didn't happen because you didn't report it. And it's like, okay, those are the kind of people that make it hard to report this, because you're probably the same people who are like,
shouldn't have won that me, scared mama.
Point being, she didn't say anything, and that's her prerogative. That is something that I'm not even gonna really touch on outside of that. Victims will respond in whatever way they're going to respond. Who are we to judge? Another really fun component of this whole case is who knew about her pregnancy. My first example is a woman named Caylee Marie Torres. So she was Casey's friend from middle school to high school, very ride or die, and she was one of the friends that Casey actually had told her several months into her pregnancy that she was in fact pregnant. Casey was like, I don't want to keep this baby, like I'm 19. No, I'm so good, thank you. And Caylee Marie was like, well shit, I can't have kids of my own, give me that baby. So it kind of seemed like things were cut and dry. Casey was gonna give Caylee up for adoption, no big deal. But then it became a big deal because Cindy found out and was like, actually, no, you're not gonna be doing that. You're gonna go ahead and keep the baby. Good luck. And just like put the kibosh on the entire situation. Honestly, the biggest reason I bring this specific instance up is because Cindy later on was like,
I don't know about this baby. What are you talking about?
okay, but if you prevented an adoption, yes, you did. Unless Casey was lying about it in order to not have to give up her own baby. So now we're gonna get into the wedding that kind of opened this can of worms. So I guess Casey's uncle was getting married, right? So Casey rolls up like heavily pregnant, but like she wasn't telling anybody. So her uncle was like, that dress is looking a little tight, particularly in the belly area. Do you have any super fun news that you would like to share? And she's like, yeah, I had a burrito for lunch. Surprise. So he's like, well, clearly you're not gonna tell me anything. So he goes over to Cindy and Cindy's like, apparently, Cindy, the queen of denial, said that Casey was still a virgin and that she was just filling out her womanly form. It was all very Virgin Mary, Immaculate Conception of them, but they all truly committed to the bit, it seems like. However, even to this day, questions still seem to kind of linger about who actually knew about the pregnancy. Was it Cindy and Casey against the world? Or was it Casey from her family? Or Cindy was actually fully in denial, and that's why it kind of seemed like she was like, no, what the fuck are you talking about? Choose your own adventure. There were also a few sources that alleged that Cindy and George forced Casey to lie because she was like this unwed 19-year-old, whatever, big deal, very puritanical of them. And in fact, there was a situation where Casey came into Cindy's office where she was working in a fold-down parka in the middle of summer in Florida. Like, honey bear, if you're trying to hide this pregnancy, maybe opt for a flowy sundress, not a full-ass parka, because that will cause suspicion, and it did. And Cindy's coworkers were like, hey, what's going on with your girl? Is she having an issue thermal regulating? And Cindy was like, yeah, I don't know, maybe. Anyway, who wants McDonald's for lunch? All of this leads us into Lee's testimony. Remember Lee, Casey's older brother? His testimony, if it was true, basically blows the lid off of the entire Anthony clan and how in love with lying they were. During the trial in Lee's testimony, he was visibly upset over the pregnancy with Caylee, how he was left out of everything.
Mr. Anthony, can you tell us why you were angry and who you were angry with, as to why you didn't go and see Caylee and Casey at the hospital?
I was very angry at my mom, and I was also angry at my sister. I mean, I was just angry at everyone in general that they didn't want to include me and didn't find it important enough to tell me, especially after I'd already asked. So I was I was very hurt. I don't think I wanted to believe it, you know.
And once Lee finally got around to confronting Cindy, she was like, just let it go and sweep it under the rug. No big deal. For him, this didn't really fix the problem, but what are you gonna do? You have no choice. Are you gonna make your sister piss on a stick? No, probably not. That's super weird. So he's like, okay, fine, and just kept it moving until August 2005, when basically the family was like, hey, Casey's about to give birth. And he's like, wait, what? Long story long, Lee decided that he was gonna bail out on Caylee's birth altogether because he was like, well, you didn't want to include me up until now, so why the fuck am I gonna show up? And he was just generally super hurt that his family completely excluded him from this whole pregnancy situation. Unfortunately, Lee kind of went back and forth on his statement as well and was essentially like, well, I don't know what I said 2 years ago about this life-altering event. Maybe I was making it up. Who knows? Speaking of pregnancy, Caylee Marie Anthony was born August 9th, 2005, and at that point, Casey and Jesse were like, let's give it another go. Let's get back together. A few months into their relationship and fatherhood for Jesse, on December 31st, 2005, he ended up proposing to Casey. She accepted. One big happy family. Go team. During my research, I found this really excellent quote when Greta, the Fox News reporter, asked Jesse about his paternity to Caylee, when he said, quote, well, I'm not a doctor, but I know that you have to be pregnant for 9 months to have a baby full term, as far as I understand, and we were not together until the end of January, and the baby was born full term in August. It would be tough for the math to add up for me to biologically be her father, unquote. That being said, about 6 weeks after Caylee was born, Jesse said, fuck this, got a paternity test, and discovered that he was 0% likely to be Caylee's father. Regardless, even by his own admission, this didn't change his love for Caylee, and he went on to say, quote, no piece of paper could tell me to love her differently, and to this day, even though I wasn't in her life, I was her father. I didn't know any other way to love her, unquote. It's kind of super fucked up too, because Casey really let the whole family in on this, like the grunt side, and when Caylee was born, Jesse's father and mom came to the hospital to visit with Caylee, fresh baby new, and then went on to bless and dedicate her. And Casey's just like, oh, good job, thanks, guys. He also talked about the fact that Casey and Caylee spent just so much time at their house, so he was actively expressing this grandfatherly love toward this baby that was not actually related to him. Jesse and Casey stayed together a few more months until eventually her erratic behavior got the better of him and he said actually goodbye for good and peace the hell out, and they never got back together after the May of 2006. Thank you so much for your patience with that copious amount of background information, but now we're going to start to get into the meat of everything. On June 15th, 2008, Cindy took Caylee to visit her great-grandpa in a retirement home, taking this super cute video of Caylee, and she was completely unaware that this is the last recording or photo that she would ever get of her granddaughter again. Quick background, this entire time that Casey has been living with Cindy and her dad, they let her borrow their white Pontiac Sunfire, but on June 16th, Casey and Cindy got in a big ass argument, and Casey ended up stealing money from her mom and then stealing the car, as according to Cindy. I guess according to one of Casey's friends, Cindy was being pretty overbearing toward her and trying to smother Casey and Caylee, and I'd also read too that Cindy had kind of started like bailing on agreements to watch Caylee. So between the hot and cold of Cindy being super overbearing, but then being like,
nah, I don't really feel like it.
When it came to babysitting Caylee, Casey said, okay, fuck you, bye. And then 2 days later, on June 18th, a neighbor allegedly saw Casey backing into the Anthony family driveway, getting out of the car, coming over to the neighbor's house, and then borrowing their shovel, and then just like leaving. That would be the last instance that anybody outside of Casey's friend group saw her for 31 days. Now we're just gonna kind of quickly breeze through 31 days that Casey and Caylee were MIA. So over those 31 days, Cindy's like, hello, can I talk to my granddaughter? Like, I love you, but I also love her, and I keep talking to you, but I haven't heard hide or tail of the baby. What gives? Casey was like, oh, I'm just like super busy at work in Tampa, which is another excuse she gave when she got out of the house. She had to go work in Tampa, so she's like, oh oh yeah, I'm just like super busy, completely slammed, I don't know what to tell you. Also, Caylee's with the babysitter, Zenaida Gonzalez Fernandez, and I don't want you to talk to her because you're just like so clingy and it's really cramping my mother-daughter vibe. Casey said that she met Zanny through a man named Jeff Hopkins who worked with Casey at Universal Studios. Zanny and Jeff allegedly had dated, they had broken up, and now Zanny was still babysitting Zachary, Jeff's son. Great. According to Casey, Jeff was just rolling in the dough and he was actually paying for Zanny to watch both Zach and Caylee. I don't know, 2-for-1 deal. Not really sure what was going on there. But it was kind of nice because allegedly Casey and Jeff were like BFFs. They were super close. Casey was loved by his mom, Jules, who was fighting cancer. Casey allegedly had pictures of Jeff and Zachary, and Cindy had actually allegedly found a folder titled Boyfriend in Casey's phone and saw the picture of Jeff and Zach. Around Christmas time, Casey told her family that it was time to prepare some extra spots at the table, get some extra gifts, because Zachary, Jeff, and Jules are all coming to the family shindig. Casey had her family all gassed up for this blended family Christmas, but at the last minute, Jules very rudely canceled on them. Very upsetting. But this wasn't the last time that a possible family meet cute was just randomly canceled at the last minute. Casey also decided to use Jules as part of her alibi during her 31-day excursion through Florida and had her family convinced that she was supposed to go to a surprise wedding for Jules, which I thought was weird. I've never really heard of a surprise wedding. If you have, let me know. Unfortunately for Casey, all of her lies were about to be undone by July of 2008. There was apparently a notice that was left in a rather unused entrance of the Anthony home, so it took a few days, but eventually someone used that door, and George noticed that there was one of those tickets that basically was like, hey, come get your shit, your car's at the impound. He's like, bro, are you joking? George goes to the lot and finds out that on June 27th, the car had been abandoned by Casey in some Amscot Financial parking lot. Apparently, she had just run out of gas and said, I just cashed my check. I'm not going to really have any money to get gas. Also, my car is fully out of gas because I drove here on fumes. I think I'll just leave it. It's all good, man. She just decided it was a lot harder to go get a gas can, walk her ass down to the next Arco, and then come back, but that's okay. Not my business. Eventually, one of the employees went outside and noticed that it was pretty rank around the car. Granted, the car was parked next to a dumpster, so she's like, okay, maybe there's a dead raccoon in the dumpster. Who knows? But it smelled real bad, and it seemed like it was coming from the car. But anyway, the supervisor of the tow truck yard who had removed the car also smelled some nasty ass odor, and he had actually discovered a dead body in a car before and was like, yep, that's the smell of death. There's no mistaking that. Gross. So like I said, someone had to go pick up the car. Cindy and George were on the case. They get there and Cindy's stressed the hell out. She's freaking out at employees. She's going full Karen mode because someone said her car smells like a dead body. And her granddaughter and her daughter have been missing for 31 days. So yeah, naturally a little freaked out at this point. But George, who was a police officer in the past, kind of had like that chill face and was like, okay, Cindy's losing her mind over here, so I have to keep it together for both of us. Let me just go get the car. I'm gonna sniff around and see if it actually smells like a dead body. He goes over, smells like a dead body. Further adding anxiety to the entire situation was George looked in the back and he saw Casey's purse and Caylee's car seat that had one of her stuffies just buckled in the back seat. So he's like, well shit, why would Casey leave her purse there? What is going on? This does not look good. So now George feels the evidence of foul play is kind of stacking up and not in their favor because smells like a dead body. Caylee and Casey's essentials are just ditched in the back seat, and he hasn't even checked the trunk yet, which seems like that's where the smell was emanating from. He talks about how he was just like praying that when they opened the trunk, they wouldn't find Caylee, Casey, or both. Luckily, they didn't, but apparently when they opened the trunk, the smell just hit him like a ton of bricks. It was rat nasty in there. He did say that there was a pizza, like old rotting gross, and a bag of trash with maggots just like swarming around in there. Another interesting point was apparently, allegedly, before Casey had dropped the car off, she had called up one of her friends and was like, I think there's a dead squirrel stuck in my wheel well, which then later Cindy tried to like backtrack. a little bit and be like, no, it's not a dead human body. It was just a dead squirrel that we smelled. Stop freaking out. So now that the car was confirmed to be bodiless and just stinky as hell, George and Cindy had to drive it home. Unfortunately for George, it was the middle of summer, hotter than Satan's asshole, and it smelled like death in the car, so he had to ride through the muggy, awful Florida heat, smelling death with his windows down. I can't even handle windows down in summer without the smell of a decomposing body. George later said that it would have been pretty much impossible to drive the car home with the windows up because the smell was just so rank in there. Once George gets the car home, he goes into full detective mode and starts sneaking around in there and seeing what he can see. And I guess when he popped the trunk, he noticed that there was a stain on one of the wheel wells, not looking good. I also heard that it was on the spare tire cover, but I could be wrong. Multiple sources said either wheel well or spare tire cover. And don't forget, at this point, Casey and Caylee are still very much missing, and now they have a dead body scented car with some weird stains in the back and the weird evidence left behind in the form of Casey's purse, car seat, and doll. Nothing about this looks like it's going to have a happy resolution. Sick of the smell, Cindy goes absolutely apeshit on the car and starts drenching it in Lysol and cleaning supplies to try and get rid of that god-awful scent when she comes across the number for one of Casey's friends, Amy. Cindy bit down hard on this lead and immediately calls up Amy and is like, hey, have you seen my daughter? Because we just found some super worrisome stuff. And Amy's like, yeah, she's with her boyfriend Jesse. She has been for like 31 days. What are you talking about? And that's where Anthony Lazzaro comes in. Amy said that Casey had been staying with her boyfriend, Anthony Lazzaro, who she met when he was DJing in a club. I guess they'd been dating for a little while, and he had already met Caylee, so he and his roommates were extremely used to Caylee coming around, and from all accounts, they really loved this little girl. They thought she was super cute, super smart, just generally good vibes to have around, so they really didn't mind when Casey would bring her over. They also mentioned that Casey was this kick-ass mom, but we're gonna save that until the innocent episode. Amy seemed to be really the only contact who knew where Casey was. That being said, Cindy's like, can you please take me to his house? I need to make sure that my daughter is fine. So Amy goes to a local mall, picks up Cindy, and they hightail it over to Anthony's apartment. I guess Casey had just been chilling over at Lazzaro's house, and she'd been smoking weed with him and the gang when who would pop up? Cindy. Amy had knocked on the door. Casey allegedly had answered, and Cindy just bum rushed in and was like, what the fuck are you doing? Casey's like, Mom, stop it. I'm with my friends. Leave me alone. Also, don't ask where Caylee is. Eventually, Cindy's able to convince Casey to come with her and go hunt down Caylee. But Casey being Casey, she was not about to show her belly that easy, and even though she agreed to bring Cindy to Caylee, once they got in the car, it became extremely clear that that actually wasn't going to happen, so Cindy said, mm-mm. So she calls the cops.
Hi, I drove to the police department here on Pershing, but you guys are closed. I need to bring someone into the police department. Can you tell me where the closest one I can come into?
What are you trying to accomplish by bringing them to the station?
I have a 22-year-old person that has grand theft sitting in my auto with me.
So the 22-year-old person stole something?
Yeah. My car was stolen. We've retrieved it today. We found out where it was at. I've retrieved it. I've got that. And I've got affidavit for my banking account. I want to bring her in. I want to press charges.
Where did all of this happen? I need to establish a jurisdiction is what I'm trying.
Oh, I live in Orlando, 4937 Hope Spring Drive.
That's actually going to be in the jurisdiction of the sheriff's office, ma'am, not the Orlando Police Department.
All righty.
Let me transfer you over to the communications section for Orange County.
Okay.
Hold on.
Okay. So my next thing will be down child sting, and we'll have a court order to get us. If that's what you want to say, we'll do it. You'll never. Well, then you have. No, I'm not giving you another day. I've given you a month.
She was kind of hoping that this would cause Casey to freak out and give up the goat. Didn't work because it's Casey. During the hold, while it still records, don't say stupid shit while you're on hold with the police. Coincidentally, all of this went down on the same day that George had started his new job, and so he was not home. So Cindy tried to call him. He couldn't answer. So the next best thing was to reach out and call Lee. Lee was kind of like the family mitigator, where he would essentially take every single argument that Cindy and Casey would frequently get into, break them up, and then Wu saw the entire family. By the time Casey and Cindy had gotten home, Lee was already sitting posted waiting for them. Casey sees him, does one of these, and just goes straight into her room before he can ask any questions. But Lee's not a dumbass, and so he immediately followed his sister and was like, hey, what the hell? Let's talk about this. Where is my niece? That initial line of questioning really didn't work on Casey, so he decided to get into cop roleplay mode and was like, okay, listen, I'm Officer Lee, and you're in my jurisdiction, bitch. Where's your daughter? It was basically kind of spinning it like, okay, maybe if she can get in the headspace that I'm not her brother, we'll be more comfortable just coming forward. Maybe she'll tell me where Caylee is, and he promised that if she told him where Caylee was, he'd go just check on her, doesn't even need to pick her up and bring her home. He just wanted to verify that she was good, and then he wouldn't tell the family where Caylee was. That's when Casey broke and was like, okay, yeah, I actually don't know where she is. She's been missing for 31 days. Nosy ass Cindy managed to overhear this and was like, wait, what? So she gets on the phone again and calls 911, and it's heartbreaking to listen to.
Little bit ago, the deputy sheriff saying I found out my granddaughter has been taken. She has been missing for a month. Her mother finally admitted that she's been missing. Okay, what is here now? Okay, what is the address that you're calling from? 4937 Rope Spring Drive. We're talking about a 3-year-old little girl. My daughter finally admitted that the baby's in the store. I need to find her. Your daughter admitted that the baby is where? The babysitter took her months ago that my daughter's been looking for. I told you my daughter was missing for a month. I just found her today, but I can't find my granddaughter. She just admitted to me that she's been trying to find her herself. There's something wrong. I found my daughter's car today, and it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car. Okay, what is the 3-year-old's name? Caylee. Caylee Anthony. Caylee Anthony? Yes. Hey, is she white, black, or Hispanic? She's white. How long has she been missing for? She took her a month ago. She was missing for a month. Is your daughter there? I'm on the phone with them. Is your daughter there? Yes. Can I speak with her? Do you mind if I speak with her? Thank you. I called them 2 hours ago. They haven't gotten here. Can you speak finally? And this is Danny. He took her a month ago. It's on the places. Ma'am. Hey, Danny's here. They want to talk to you. Hello? Hello? Yeah. Hi. Well, can you tell me what's going on a little bit? I'm sorry? Can you tell me a little bit what's going on? My daughter's been missing for the last 31 days. And you know who has her? I know who has her. I've tried to contact her. I actually received a phone call today. Now from a number that is no longer in service. I did get to speak to my daughter for about a minute. And you last saw her a month ago? 31 days. From 31 days. Who has her? Do you have a name? Her name is Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. Who is that? Babysitter? She's been my nanny for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years. Yeah, why are you calling now? Why didn't you call 31 days ago? I've been looking for her and have gone through other resources to try to find her, which is stupid.
As you heard on that call, Cindy says it smells like there's been a body in the damn car. When the cops show up, she fails to mention it for whatever reason. I don't know why. For the benefit of the doubt, we're just gonna say she was overwhelmed and forgot to say something. Now, as we've already established, Casey allegedly left Caylee with Zanny the nanny on June 16th. The cops are like, great, where does she live? Let's go get your baby back. So Casey goes, oh yeah, she lives at the Sawgrass Apartments, apartment 210. She has 2 roommates. Let me go ahead and take you to her apartment. So as they're talking to her and trying to kind of like gather information, Casey says that on June 16th, after she dropped Caylee off, she went to work, had her full day, and around 5 p.m. she was intended to pick Caylee up. So she goes to Zanny's apartment, knock, knock, knock. No one answers. She's like, well, shit. So she calls Zanny. Phone's disconnected. So she's like, well, double shit. So she thought, okay, let me just go ahead and wait on the stairs. Maybe their car broke down. Maybe Zanny has run behind it and she got distracted, whatever, like trying to give some sort of plausible explanation as to where her child was. After a while, Zanny nor the roommates showed up. So Casey's like, okay, well, let me go to this local park where Caylee loves to hang around. Not there. So she's freaking out. Not freaked out enough to call the cops, mind you, but allegedly freaking out. Just a side note, in a book called Imperfect Justice by Lisa Pulitzer and Jeff Ashton, it seemed odd to me that Casey's story now failed to mention the 2 roommates she had earlier created for Zanny who should have been home or come home sometime that evening, unquote. But they didn't, because they didn't exist. Zanny was made up. The ladies were made up. All this shit was made up. It turns out once the police arrived at Zanny's apartment, they knocked, no one was home. So they're like, what the fuck? So they go to the manager. The manager was like, yeah, that apartment's been vacant for months. Nobody by the name of Zanny has even lived there. Interestingly, someone named Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez had visited the apartment to just like do a tour, and so her name was allegedly associated with that specific apartment, but it was like a here's my phone number, call me if the apartment opens up or whatever. She didn't live there. She had just toured there. Somehow, apparently Casey had gotten onto this information, or she was just extremely lucky with the name choice, but she somehow managed to convince everybody, including police for a minute, that Zanny had lived there when she didn't, because she just toured it. Also, once they eventually caught up with Zanny, she's like, I have no idea who the fuck this lady is. So it just soon became extremely clear that Casey was, again, full of shit. So then that might lead to the question in your head, like it did mine, what's going on with this Jeff guy? Like, did he lie? Does he even exist? No, he doesn't. I mean, he does, but he existed in Casey's world for like the 2 years that they were together in middle school, and then outside of that, no connection. Not sure why she clung to him, but she surely did. When he eventually testified as well against Casey, he said, I don't have a kid. I don't know Zanny, and I didn't really know Casey outside of middle school, so I don't know why I'm involved here. Can I please go home? Obviously, his mother, Jules, was also just completely fabricated bullshit. So, yeah. On July 16th, 2008, after Casey had gone through all of this, eventually she was actually arrested, thank God, but she wasn't allegedly read her Miranda rights. It kind of cracks me up because her defense attorney, Jose Baez, was like, when she was arrested, without her Miranda rights, she had her freedom curtailed. Like, yeah, that's kind of the point of arresting someone, Jose. But I mean, to be fair, he was kind of pissed that she wasn't read her Miranda rights, allegedly, but I wasn't there. I couldn't tell you. And as far as I could find, because body cams weren't necessarily as pushed back then, there wasn't really body cam footage of her arrest from what I could find. A day later, on July 17th, a full investigation was launched. They had the cadaver dogs out there sniffing around, and they did actually scent the smell of decomposition from the trunk of Casey's car. They also found a piece of hair that could have belonged to Casey, Cindy, or Caylee, but because it didn't still have the like DNA little chunk on the end that I can't think of the name of, they couldn't test it. But it was like, okay, well, the hair is a long piece of virgin hair. At the time, Casey had short hair and Cindy had dyed hair. So like it seemed like it should have belonged to Caylee, but they couldn't really confirm it. The investigators had also caught Casey in another lie when she was like, oh yeah, for sure, I work at Universal. Remember earlier we talked about how she worked at Universal, but she had heavily implied that she worked for Universal, not Kodak. So she still had her lanyard and her badge for whatever weird ass reason, and she took them on this random goose chase through the labyrinthian back rooms of the Universal Studio offices, and she's smiling and waving at all of the coworkers there, and they're like, bitch, what the fuck, who are you? But she made it seem convincing. Unfortunately for Casey, because she didn't work there, she did get lost, hit a dead end, and turned around smiling and was like, you got me, boys, I don't actually work here. And they're like, ma'am, we're not playing this game. So they drag her into one of the random offices and actually start interrogating her on the spot in order to get some sort of information out of her from investigators. Didn't happen, wonder why. But she was just completely unwavering, and they're like, okay, bitch, why did you bring us here? So on August 5th, Casey gets thrown into jail for child neglect, filing a false police report, and then also a few weeks later, they found out that she'd been trying to pass forged checks up to about $600. So things aren't looking good for our girl. God bless this random bounty hunter, Leonard Padilla, who was like, oh, maybe if I bail her out on her $500,000 bail, she'll lead us to Caylee. No harm, no foul. So he bails her out, and she's like, yeah, that's not happening, but thanks. bye. And I'm also not really sure if this is Leonard throwing a tantrum that Casey decided not to play ball, but he started like kind of going off on her and being like, she is a rampant party whore. Oh my god, bad mommy. I can't say I disagree with the bad mom part, but like, let's not slut shame, okay? I don't like her and I'm not defending her. I'm defending the other rampant party whores that like to go out. Who cares? Party whored up. I love that for you. The mystery of Caylee's missing body came down to an extremely unfortunate finding on December 11th, 2008, when the skeletal remains of a toddler were found in a wooded area about half a mile from the Anthony home. So at this point, a lot of people are like, oh, that's definitely Caylee, but let's wait until we get the autopsy report. So a few days later, on December 19th, the autopsy comes in. It's confirmed to be Caylee. So her body was found wrapped up in a little laundry bag, like kind of one of those two sets where you can like put your lights and your darks and whatever. It's important. We'll get to it in a second. And then that is wrapped in a black plastic bag, and she's found with duct tape, allegedly 3 pieces over her nose and mouth. According to the prosecution, it's the duct tape that took her out, but the medical examiner was never able to specifically confirm that that's what ended up killing Caylee. She just said death by undetermined means. Now we're going to take a quick shift to a man named Roy Kronk. He's the guy who reported this not once, not twice, 3 freaking times. Though I think if my math is right, it's technically 4, because the first time he found her, he tried to call back to back to back 3 days in a row. And then on the 4th call, that's when the investigators were like, oh shit, it's a body. Apparently, his account goes that about 4 months back, he had to go piddle while out doing his little meter reader job, and he was with 2 other coworkers. One of the boys had to take a piddle, so they pull off to the side of the road, find a lightly wooded area, and like kind of go off the beaten path just a little, not a lot. When Roy spots a plastic bag, he's like, that's suspicious, that's weird. But then very quickly after that, one of his coworkers freaked out because he saw a dead rattlesnake, so naturally the boys being boys were like, oh my god, dead animal? What? So they all walked over, investigated that, and completely got distracted from the bag. So Roy gets home, he's like, shit, I should probably call him that. He calls one day, they're like, okay, great, we're gonna look at it. Didn't happen. Day 2, okay, great, we're gonna look at it. Didn't happen. Day 3, when he finally was able to contact the sheriff's communication center, they finally send a deputy out. The deputy gets there, 1 look, 2 look, nothing. I don't know what's here. I don't know what you're talking about. And according to Roy, the deputy went on and just started berating the hell out of Roy for wasting his time. So 4 months later, in kind of like current time, Roy goes back to the area on assignment and he notices, hey, the bag's still there. There's this little white chunk that's poking out. Let me go poke it with a stick. So he goes over, grabs a stick, starts poking. Unbeknownst to him, he has accidentally jammed the stick into Caylee's skull's eye socket and is like wiggling it around. Although there were other accounts that he picked up the bag, the body fell out and he freaked out. Doesn't matter. The point is he found her body and then immediately called 911. Luckily, they got involved this time and the search was over for Caylee. A little 4 months too late, but that's okay. We got there, I guess. So back to the main-ish timeline. Now the investigators are in full-fledged oh shit mode and they have started doing their deep investigation. They get the car. They had already kind of like confirmed with cadaver dogs that there was a dead body in the trunk, along with numerous other allegations of there being a body in the trunk. Doesn't matter because they actually got science involved this time, took some air samples and found that there was high traces of chloroform and the components that basically make up decomposition. In fact, the tech who got the initial air sample, when he opened it, it just smacked him in the face. The smell was so putrid and so evident still in the air sample that he was like, shit, that's a dead body. There was really no ifs, ands, or buts. There was a dead body in the trunk. But whose? Was it a dead squirrel, like Casey said? I don't honestly have an answer for you. If you know, let me know in the comments. That's actually something I am curious about. So seriously, if you do know, is there going to be a compositional difference between the components that make up a dead human body versus like a dead squirrel body in this example? That would be really interesting. And I do wonder if there's any sort of difference or if there truly was a dead squirrel in the trunk that Casey just left there and then I don't know, randomly took back out because it was never found. Would it show up the same as just like general death? Let me know. I'm actually really curious. As far as the chloroform is concerned, it was in high lethal doses. As we all know, well, you might not know, there was that joke where someone would like take a rag and be like, does this smell like chloroform to you? Because of that joke, I found out chloroform knocks your little ass out for a lot less funny reasons. But in high enough doses, it can actually knock you out forever and put you to permanent nanites, which there was speculation that that could have been what happened to Caylee. Or the other theory was Zanny the nanny was like Xanax distributed to Caylee in order for Casey to be able to basically go out and party and live her best life. So on October 14th, 2009, court proceedings starts. Casey is indicted on 7 charges related to Caylee's disappearance and death, including first-degree murder. Naturally, Casey being who she is, she's like, nah, not guilty. What are you gonna do? Once investigators got their grubby little paws on the computer in March of 2008, they actually found some alarming searches on the computer. And this was brought up in court, which is why we're talking about it now. So, some of the searches include neck breaking, shovel, household weapons, and chloroform. In the spirit of playing devil's advocate, we're gonna go with Cindy's story. So she said that she was looking up chlorophyll because she had some bamboo in the backyard. She's like, is this going to murder my dogs? Chlorophyll is the shit that makes plants green. Super. So she's like, typing it in, sees chloroform pop up, and is like, I want to learn about that instead, and clicks on it. For years, I personally was like, that's bullshit. You're so dumb. Until like 2 weeks ago when I was doing research on a case, something very similar happened, and I spent an embarrassing amount of time on a rabbit hole when I should have been looking up something completely different. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe. Sorry, Cindy, for this particular judgment. For the other ones, jury's still out in my world, sorry. Okay, so on March 24th, 2011, prosecutors are going after Casey for first-degree murder with the death penalty on the line. Don't forget, in this episode, we're on the prosecutor's side. But the more I did research, the more I realized that I think the prosecution maybe girl-bossed a little too close to the sun, because they were equipped with every bit of scientific evidence you could ever want. The problem is, the general population, including myself, are a bunch of dumbasses. So you throw all of this information at us and we're going to be like, that's cool. Did she do it or not? So it's kind of hard to extrapolate some of that more scientific information if that's not something that you're completely involved in, or if the prosecution hasn't effectively broken it down, which is what it seems like happened in this particular case. That being said, all the defense had to do was be like, have you considered it was the dad? So yeah, people who are kind of confused and already maybe annoyed that they're confused and are maybe looking for a more easily digestible answer, or are willing to be in that headspace of reasonable doubt, which as a jury member, like, to be fair, you should be. Like, you should be willing to look at all of the options. But I feel like, especially in this particular case, there was so much scientific evidence that the jurors got super overwhelmed. And yeah, we'll get to that verdict in a minute. I just think in general, the ball was dropped because prosecutors didn't dumb down the lingo for the Floridians that were on the jury. But still, we're going to go into the evidence that I personally believe should have nailed Casey's ass to the wall super quick. The prosecution essentially started its bid by saying, hey, she is a party girl, she's promiscuous, blah, 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 which again, shut the fuck up, that shouldn't matter. But they were trying to spin it like she's a bad mom. And also she spent 31 days, from all outside accounts, not giving a shit about her missing daughter. Although, again, according to her, she cared a lot, so much so that she was going to look into it herself, boots on the ground. But according to her friends, she wasn't acting as if her daughter was missing. She was cool as a cucumber. She was out chilling, she was clubbing, hanging with friends, entering hot body contests, you name it, she was probably doing it. The prosecution also pointed to that air sample that we talked about before, the staining that we talked about before, and they had shown the scrapings that they had taken from the car, as well as suspicious paper towels that were found in a trash bag that had been in the trunk. And then we have the issue of Caylee's body just in general. So do you remember when I said she was found? She was wrapped in a laundry bag that was wrapped in the black trash bag. So that laundry bag, I said it came as a twofer. Want to guess where the other fucking half of that deal was? The Anthony home. You gotcha, girl. What the fuck? It was you or someone in the house, more likely than not. Otherwise, it's an extremely dedicated burglar who had come in, stolen that one bag where the UPC matched, and then killed your kid and dumped her in the woods. Like, I don't know, that just, anything's possible. It just seems like a lot of extra steps in order to carry out that horrible crime. And outside of just the general hard evidence, there's also plenty of corroborating testimonies that essentially point to Casey's guilt, at least in my opinion. It must have been kind of a hard position to be put in, but Cindy and George were both put on the stand, as well as Lee, in order to testify against Casey. But Cindy immediately tried to walk back her whole "it smells like a damn body has been in the car" statement, and she's like, "Oh, it was just the pizza and the maggots, I don't know, whatever, no big deal." But like, no ma'am, that's a big deal. I don't think they smell the same. And then there's the tow truck driver who got to the car before George or Cindy opened the trunk, and he's like, "It smells like death." George, with his police trained nose, "It smells like death." And during that whole 9 days of testimony from friends, family, whoever against Casey, it was so evident that yes, she loved her daughter, but she was not frantic. She was not searching for her from all outside perspectives. Something else that's frequently talked about, and a lot of people like to use it as like evidence against her. I think it could have just been dumbass timing, but I don't know. I'm not Casey and I've never murdered a toddler, allegedly. But after Caylee went missing, she got a tattoo that says Bella Vita, that when translated means beautiful life. It's not a good look, for sure. And there was some journal entry where she essentially is like, "I made the right decision for myself. I'm firm in my decisions, and I think I did what was right." Like, sis, what are you talking about? Don't say that. Anyway, the jailhouse phone calls between Casey and her parents were also released during the trial. Didn't look good because essentially the conversation got around to the press, alluding to the fact that maybe Caylee drowned and George and Casey essentially did a cover-up, or Casey covered it up on her own, or whatever. When Cindy tells this to Casey, Casey's like, "Oh, surprise, surprise, stupid ass tabloids." Like, girl, because then she tried to use that as her defense later when she won the case. She's innocent, bitch. But we'll get to that in the next episode, so stay tuned. You're just gonna have to sit and wonder about how 12 jurors thought that scientific evidence actually doesn't matter. Reasonable doubt 1. And how Casey is free as Britney. I do hate it here. Anywho, like, subscribe, bell icon, community tab, check that bitch frequently. Love you so much. I'll see you in the next episode. Keep your noggin on a swivel. Toodaloo.